would like to invite now a very significant partner of Mindset for a long time, which is the British Embassy in Israel, the UK Israel hub. Eleanor Honigstein is here representing them, and she's going to lead a panel about how we should be thinking about AI and technology from the product development to the user perspective, and think about equitable diversity and equity. Eleanor, thank you so much for coming, and please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Cecilia and Mindset, for having us today. So I'm Eleanor. I head the UK office at the UK Israel Tech Hub. We are a UK government team that's operating from London and the British Embassy in Tel Aviv, and we build tech partnerships between the two countries. So today I'm delighted to kind of tackle a topic that's really important to me personally, and I'm sure to all of you, the way that technology can help us bridge the gap between students with different learning needs and across different regions. So we've brought together the best minds in education technology across the UK and Israel, who will discuss the needs of the learners that technology can address, the barriers and the opportunities, as well as some actions that we can take from different perspectives. So I'm delighted to hand over now to Joyce John, who will moderate today's discussion, and we'll also introduce our panelists. Joyce is the CEO of 01 Founders, tuition-free coding schools to improve diversity in tech. She's the former director of education at Nesta, one of the largest innovation foundations in the UK. Joyce was also the chief industry officer at ADA, the National College for Digital Skills, and worked with technology incubators and VCs, such as EF Learning Labs, Emerge Education, and Level 39. Joyce, thank you so much for joining us and for moderating today's panel. And over to you.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce the panelists. So we have Julia joining us from Twinkle Education. Sorry, Julia, the head of EdTech from Cambridge University Press. We have Tony Muir, head of inclusion at Twinkle Education, and Mario Barosevic from Investor at Emerge Education. And finally, Efrat Kadush, who's the AI product manager at Intel Israel. So I know that we are running a bit short on time, so I will try and keep these questions very brief and concise. So if I can ask the very first question to Julia. Julia, if you could just tell us a bit about how diversity and inclusion are integrated with your work at Cambridge University Press.
Thanks, Joyce, and thanks for having me on the panel. So I work at Cambridge University Press, and we are the oldest publisher in the world. And one of the things we do is we publish textbooks and digital resources for teachers around the world, and they're used in 120 different countries. So when we design products and when we design teacher training courses, we really have to think about diversity. Firstly, cultural diversity. Secondly, pedagogical diversity. How can we design things that are going to be engaging for an expat teacher in a Swiss school who's been trained in the UK, but also a teacher in Vietnam who's less confident with their language skills and maybe is new to active learning? Technical, practical accessibility. How can we design products that are going to be useful in a school with one-to-one laptops and fiber optic, just as they'll also be useful in a school with limited connectivity? COVID has brought a whole other dimension. So our products, our books, our digital resources are now also being used in online only and in hybrid scenarios, as well as in face-to-face classrooms. So how do we tackle that, and what's our approach? If I were to pick out one principle, it's the principle of flexibility. We try to design solutions that have a low barrier to entry, a low threshold and a high ceiling. So for example, when we design digital resources, we try and design products where you can use the very basic functionality very easily, like sharing the basic content in a textbook, but it's also flexible enough that you can share it on platforms with more sophisticated functionality. Or if we're designing a teacher training course, rather than trying to train all the teachers around the world, we'll design a program that empowers heads of departments and middle leaders to use very flexible, simple materials like PowerPoints to train their own teachers in their context. So to answer your question, Joycey, I'd say we aim for designing solutions that have a low threshold to access and a high ceiling, even if that means less control of our data, sometimes less control of our IP, and simpler technologies. Oh, you're on mute, Joycey.
Thanks, Julia. If I could just ask Tony the next question, which is much more about product design and how do you make sure that product designers are aware of diversity and inclusion when they're designing solutions in education?
Yeah, so I have a background as a special educational needs teacher, as well as a mainstream teacher as a Senko and senior leader. So this is a very new venture for me. I've worked at Twinkle over the last year, and my passion has always been special educational needs, inclusivity, diversity. And when I was given the opportunity to do this job, it was something completely out of my comfort zone, but it finally gave me the ability to do something about it. So the frustrations that we have as teachers of knowing what we could do to make life easier, but actually not having the capabilities to do it. Now working at Twinkle, that is something that we can do. We can take it from ideation stage to the end product. And one of the biggest things that I have learned on this very steep learning curve is to always have a really clear vision. Nothing should be out of reach. The sky should always be the limit. You should start off with your non-negotiables and just build on them. We are really lucky at Twinkle. We have a really good culture of working where quick wins and failing fast is encouraged. It's kind of act now, apologize later. If there is an opportunity, take it. And that has worked really, really well. We also make sure that we reach out to our customers. A lot of our staff are still working in education. They are still teachers. Most of our staff, if they're not already working in schools, they are ex-teachers. So that means that we always have on the ground information. We always know what the pain points are, how we can make lives easier, and how to essentially help those who teach, which is Twinkle's overarching motto. Prioritization, transparency, accepting that you're probably going to get some feedback that you don't particularly envisage, and being open to that, and that will essentially make your product as successful as it can be. Allowing the user to steer where the product goes, that will open so many more avenues than what you originally anticipated. We have done that in some of the projects that we've worked on recently around the international new arrivals, with the situation that has been ongoing across the world with the refugee situation. And I had a little bit of resistance about whether it would be worth us doing certain things, and I was prepared to fail. But luckily it went the complete opposite way, and we saw something like a 600% increase in downloads. Equally, it also goes the other way, and just being flexible and open to that, that is the key.
Thanks a lot, Tony. If I can bring in a different perspective, much more from an investor's perspective, and ask Mario about what support do you think investors can provide to ensure that diversity and inclusion is built into products within the education system?
Great, thank you, Joycey. Just on a super high level, Merge Education is an education technology fund based in London, investing across Europe, particularly focused on founders that are solving the growing global skills gap, with an emphasis on companies that are helping really to democratize access to opportunity. We've seen a lot over the last decade, made more than 60 investments, so I have a lot of opinions on this space. I'd say on a high level, when it comes to the role of investment in driving diversity and inclusion, I think the potential can be huge. My previous career in social impact investing, worked a lot with companies in the nonprofit sector, raising different forms of capital from grant to debt. And while the impact was always there were always challenges around, how can we reach much greater scale and serve serve these solutions on a more global environment. I think in the VC world, there's a big emphasis on investing in businesses that can really scale, and I think there's big potential overlaps here in terms of businesses that can scale and those that can move the needle when it comes to diversity and inclusion. But I think that the key thing to keep in mind is that it can only happen if investors are proactively thinking about this topic and including this focus and emphasis in their impact philosophies, the types of metrics they're looking at, both through due diligence, but also when they are supporting companies and tracking how well you are doing. You have funds in the space that are primarily profit driven. You have funds that are in industries that are meaningful, and then you have a smaller group of funds that are in meaningful sectors that truly do care about diversity and inclusion. And I think an interesting thing in education, when you think about investing overall, I think it's a very impactful space. Technology can increase access and reduce costs in many situations. We need to remember that not all education solutions are created equal. And for us at Emerge, personally, it's going back to our mission statement around democratizing access to opportunity. You can argue that some tutoring solutions on the market, some expensive online degrees can perpetuate inequalities, while on the other side, you can also argue that there are equally large markets when we think about financial inclusion, autism, ADHD, that could really benefit from education solutions that yet have not been funded, because some investors would perceive these as less exciting potential industries. So I think in summary, investment can play a big role only if we proactively think about these topics, and only if funds proactively embed these mission statements and metrics into how they evaluate and support companies.
Thanks, Mario. I really need to apologize because I have another meeting at 5 o'clock. I know we are running quite late on this, so I am going to hand it back to Eleanor to continue with the panel. And thank you very much for organizing Shaping the Future. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Joycey. So Efrat, over to you. Working as an AI product manager at Intel, can you share an example of how technologies can improve the inclusion in the classroom using AI?
Sure. So we see that AI is all around us. And specifically recommendation systems. We are using them today. They recommend us what to watch, who to connect with in social media, and what to buy in online shopping. It's practically everywhere. And if you think about it, we can leverage the same technology in education. Think about a personalized recommendation system that will recommend our children for educational content. And we can expose them to content that is not even taught in school today. Things like astronomy, Chinese, agriculture, the sky is the limit. This kind of recommendation system can provide recommendations according to the kids, to the students' preferences, and they make them curious. They can also enable them to progress in their study independently, and challenge them in the right extent that fits them. Speaking of special needs, it can also, the method of learning can also be very much adjusted to the specific needs of each student. If we're talking about ADHD, language disorder, or other disabilities. In general, this kind of recommendation system would probably contain a bank of educational content that can be available for students all over the world, and specifically in developed countries, which will improve the opportunity for everyone. And it's not an imagination. Yeah, the technology is here. It's something that can be achieved.
Thank you so much, Efrat. And Tony, back to you. I know when we spoke, you said that you were a teacher in a mainstream school, and also for children with different learning disabilities. I'd love to know how that teaching experience really shaped your work currently, and what can we all learn from that as kind of a practical action point for people who work in the ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. So like I'd mentioned before, I've worked across mainstream and special education schools, which offers a huge range of perspectives and different ways of working. Like I say, the biggest frustration was always that we knew what we wanted to do, but we just weren't able to do it. In my time of working for Twinkle in the last 10 months, we've really taken that and we've run with it. We've got an app at the moment that we're developing in a web tool called Twinkle Symbols, which originated from the frustrations again as a teacher. When I worked in a special educational needs school, we had some issues with communication. Everybody has different levels of communication: non-verbal, pre-verbal, BSL, Makaton, but there isn't a one size fits all. And as teachers, we would have lanyards around our necks with trying to remember every possible situation that you might need to be able to communicate using a symbol that would be universally recognized by everybody. That in theory works really well. However, in practice, if you've got a child who is becoming very dysregulated very quickly and you need to communicate with them in order to bring them back down and to be able to help them, you need something a lot quicker than being able to flick through symbols on a lanyard. So Twinkle Symbols has come about from that, and it's based on a schema, which means that it should be really easy for all children to follow, regardless of their communication skills. Really easy for parents to use at home, so it's not a case of teachers having to print out symbols, laminate them, Velcro them, send them home, then you never see them again because it's impossible to keep hold of them all. It is there and it is free, and every child who is entitled to a voice can have one. It's not a financial implication, it is there, it's free, and we are there to empower those children to be able to have their own voices. And that, in summary, is just one of the projects that we take from our experience in the classroom to then being able to make that a reality for other teachers who are still there.
So important. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tony. And Julia, if we need to kind of take one action point from your experience in reaching to different target populations around the world, what would it be? What would your recommendation be?
I would steal Tony's answer on that, which is all about letting users steer the product. I think I can sit in my office in Cambridge and think as much as I want about what users really need, but I'll only ever see the visible things, how much devices they've got, how much connectivity they've got. I think even if I were to ask users, they would then only be able to tell me about the potential barriers that they're aware of and that they can describe. So I think really the only way to design products that really meet the visible and invisible needs of users is to design it iteratively and in partnership with them.
Thank you very much. So true. And Mario, from the perspective of diverse founders, how can we encourage more diverse founders in the ecosystem, kind of from the point of view of capital, really?
Yeah, great question. I think, many angles you can take here in terms of attracting the interest. I think it's openly writing about a certain topic. I think one is supporting founders from certain backgrounds, and the other is supporting companies from more diverse backgrounds. I think on both fronts there's so much work to be done, and I think the key thing is about publicly writing about it, transparently talking about issue areas that funds are interested in investing in, and really encouraging people from different backgrounds to start building companies. We've seen a lot of great office hours focused on founders from various from different backgrounds that are a great way to encourage more people to talk about the ideas they have on their mind and to raise capital. So I think those are all great initiatives. And one area I'd like to flag in the education sector in particular is around getting government more involved. I think there are particular sectors, in particular K-12 in schools, where many investors just like wouldn't look at that space, given that it's very hard to sell. In Europe, long sales cycles, schools don't have money, and I think a big solution to this problem is helping schools and then the policy level to figure out where we should be steering money and how we should be investing in technologies to make sure that this rise of technology doesn't just benefit those that can afford it with parents outside of school, but also having schools and governments to invest in these technologies to make sure that there's an even playing field. So those would be just some key points from my end.
Absolutely, that cross-sector collaboration is really important. And Efrat, final question to you, the gamification, AI and gamification in learning. How do you see this supporting diverse students, and what more can be done in that front?
Okay, thank you for the question. Well, let me start with a really short story. I have 4 kids, and my youngest are 9-year-old twins. During the COVID lockdown, they were requested to to learn the multiplication table in mathematics. We were all at home, and I was watching them struggling with memorizing the exercises. And then they got so frustrated, so they just escaped to Xbox and cellular games, and there they were shining. They were so excited and so enthusiastic, and they saw how I saw how they are so happy to get fast and positive feedback, and to skip levels in the game and open boxes and whatever they're doing there. And what I was thinking is, what if just before they get to open a box or to skip a level in a game, they would be requested to solve single mathematic exercise? And I think that if it was the case, then they would probably know multiplication table by heart. And that's what my point here is, that I think we should embrace the gaming industry, and to take all the good things from this domain, and to leverage them into education. And what I see in my mind is a collaborative online game that students from around the globe can work together and handle educational assignments, both together or as a competition. This can also improve their soft skills like communication, negotiation, and so on, and also improve the educational topics that we are trying to teach them. In this kind of a game, they will, as much as they learn, as they will get some points and skip levels and get all the feedback that they get from games, and this would probably we will gain their curiosity and engagement much more than today. However, there are 2 challenges when we're speaking about this solution. One thing is that we probably all know that kids smell education from far away. And whenever a game is categorized as educational, then it's immediately not fun. So we should, our challenge is to plant the educational parts and content into the games seamlessly, and maintain all the fun principles. And the second one, which is mainly for the policymakers, both the personalized recommendation system that I talked about earlier, and also all these gamings, will require to collect a lot of data on the students and on their progress. And here we are meeting some ethics issue and privacy issues. And I think that we should address these kind of regulations as soon as possible, in order for us to maximize the value that we can gain from technology in education.
Thank you very much, such important points. And with that, we'll close the panel. And I want to say a big thank you to Julia, Tony, Mario, Efrat, and Joyce, who is not here, for your insight. It was really interesting to hear all the different perspectives, and of course to the Mindset team that invited us today. And we look forward to our future events together. Thank you so much.